letting you in. Take a look at you and start to lose my balance. What am I falling into? This feels like something new. I've seen a lot of views, but they were nothing like this. The way you do what you do, I think you're something brand new.
Let's start now with our opening discussion to set the scene and to set out our agenda for the next couple of days. I'd like to welcome on stage the CEO of E.ON and President of Eurelectric, Leonhard Birnbaum. Joining him, Georgios Stassis, Chairman and CEO of PPC Group, and Dimitri Papalexopoulos, the Chair of Titan Cement, in conversation with Andrea Falciai from Accenture. Ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and let me thank, first of all, PPC and Eurelectric for hosting us in such a wonderful location. It's a bit hard, of course, to start this panel after this speech, but I mean, let's think about how to keep the lights on for whole Europe while continuing the energy transition. And this is the right moment, I think, to do that, right? Because in 2 weeks from now, we will have election that will set the course for the next 5 years. And also, we are at the halfway point between the Paris Agreement and the first major deadline in 2030, right? Much has been achieved. We mentioned also the European Green Deal, the REPowerEU package. Also, the current EU Commission has set an ambitious target for 2030. But still, I mean, in the recent study we, as Accenture, presented at COP28, we have seen that many companies, only 18% actually of companies are cutting emissions fast enough to get to net zero for 2050. So we need some changes, right? So let me first jump into the future a bit and ask you how you see how you think Europe will look like in 5 years from now. Dimitri, you want to start probably with a broader perspective.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you for inviting me, to Leo and George for inviting me here. It's wonderful and inspiring to see what a growth industry looks like. The excitement is palpable and it's great to participate in. It's also great to share the Ukraine story of hope and heart. I'm afraid my messages are going to be a little more down to earth, and I hope I won't get your mood down. But I would like to make 2 points. One broader one, as Andrea proposed, and one more specific to energy-intensive industries. So the broader message, I think, is that the EU, Europe urgently needs a growth strategy and an economic restart, and that is hardly heard in the conversation as we go up to the elections in a couple of weeks' time. And the second message is that energy-intensive industries Europe risks deindustrializing before its industry turns green, and there's something that must be done about that. But let me start with a broader context. The numbers show that Europe has been losing competitiveness for the last 2 decades, not only against Asia, which is to be expected, but also against the US. And that trend, if anything, has accelerated in the last couple of years. And if you look ahead, there are reasons to be worried. Christian mentioned that foreign direct investment in Europe is down. That does not suggest good things looking ahead. It's up in the US. As we go through the energy transition, which is a very hopeful thing, we are stuck as Europe with structurally much higher energy prices for several years to come, and that has an effect. In the tech world, we've lost the race for the platforms that are dominated by US and China, and it looks like when it comes to AI, Europe's prime role again will be to regulate rather than to create. And Europe is also the last big bloc defending the free world trade order on which we build our prosperity and many of the other blocs are playing in different rules, and Europe is almost accused of being naive in the way it defends the free order. And all of this is happening at a time where Europe needs to invest more in defense, we know that. Europe needs to invest more in the green transition, which has turned up being more expensive and upfront than many realized at the beginning. We need to invest in other kinds of transformation, including the digital, and all of this while supporting our social model as Europe. And the reality is that the green transition and the digital transition, as wonderful as they are, and I believe in them, they do have a tendency to increase inequality, so we have to invest in all of that. And if you put all these things together, the numbers just don't add up. And the discussion is hardly to be heard when we talk about the upcoming European elections. We do need a real restart of the economy and a focus on growth and competitiveness. Now, of course, everything is not hopeless. Europe has a lot of strengths to build on, but we need a strategy. We need a sense of urgency and purpose, and the Letta report and hopefully the Draghi report to come out soon give us some direction, some indications. We need to double down on the single market, all aspects, including energy, where we're behind. We should not in any way reverse or even slow down the green transition. If anything, we have to accelerate it. But we have to be cognizant that the facts have changed since we launched a few years ago, and we have to find a more intelligent balance between climate goals, energy sufficiency, and competitiveness. And that balance is not easy, but we have to find a better balance. We have to become more geopolitically savvy in the way we deal with the rest of the world, become more outwardly focused and not as much inwardly focused in the way we deal with whether it's competition policy or trade policy and what have you. And finally, I would argue we do need a mindset shift from over-regulating, over-prescribing, and setting targets upon targets and targets and laws after law after law, and to go to an implementation mode, to go into, to get a page off the playbook of the US or China, to enable industry, to enable our private sector to succeed, rather to regulate and police. So that is sort of my plea on the general topic. Now, more specifically, just 2 words on energy-intensive industries. They are going through an existential crisis. Europe had 30% of the aluminum industry at the beginning of the century. Now it has more like 5%. Europe was a net exporter of chemicals for 100 years. It's now a net importer, and I could go on with steel and other parts. You can argue that's a relatively small part of industry. Not quite clear what the multiplier effects is. When do you stop building, for example, car plants in the US because steel or aluminum are more expensive? I don't think that the calculation is very simple. But again, the threat is there. And what we've seen up to now is sort of an energy leakage following the Ukraine crisis. What we still have ahead of us is carbon leakage as carbon pricing ramps up. And as US and China have chosen carrots instead of sticks, and they cannot, especially the US has not put a price on carbon, we see investment shifting to that part of the world. That cannot be good news for the European economy, and it's not good news for the environment either. Now, there are also some doubts as to whether the ambitious programs that many European industrial companies are having will find sufficient green energy to implement their plans by 2030. That's where you guys come in. We hope that you get there on time, and we get that security of supply at decent prices. We need to do stuff to get there. And let me stop there.
Okay, thank you so much. So back to growth, actually, with many trade-offs, also from a geopolitical perspective between Europe, US, and in Asia. What's your view on the power sector to achieve this?
First, I think it's very healthy for us as a power sector to start with an industry perspective here, because otherwise we could easily say we have no problems. We are growing, we have investment opportunities, all is fine, you know, we have a perspective. But in reality, we have to make sure that we can provide this to our customers. Exactly. And so I'm actually happy that you opened up with a pretty bleak, you know, and blunt approach. Thank you, Dimitri. I didn't expect anything less.
I call it a call to action, not bleak.
First, I would like to say I subscribe to the fact that we need growth. If we look at the power sector from the perspective of our customers, the energy transition actually can work, because the reduction in energy consumption that we have, for example, on gas, fuels, fossil fuels, can compensate for the investments which we have to make, and it can actually be a good deal. And if you look at percentage of energy per GDP, which we have to spend in the future, that won't change a lot. Yeah, exactly. But only if we grow. Because if we don't grow, it just means in relative terms the share of energy will go up, and then we will have affordability issues for customers. And that is on average, by the way. Yeah? So on average it will work, but only if we grow. So growth is important. Second, I like the fact that you have not reduced the problems of Europe on the topic of energy. Because if that would be the case, then I would say we have a problem. Yeah? Actually, I think it's a larger topic, and we should think larger. We need more innovation to have more growth. And then energy, we need to have it under acceptable conditions. So what I would offer, what I can offer as a power sector to industry today here, to my friend on my left, is that there are win-wins that we can look at. You mentioned implementation, Christian, infrastructure and investments. And I think there are win-wins in there. We certainly need a better infrastructure, and we agree on that one. So we need to make sure that we can get that financed. Also, we need to make investments. We need a real European capital market. It's actually unacceptable that the liquidity of the European markets is actually so low that as a European company, if you're really investing a lot, you need to tap into the US dollar markets, whilst I know no US utility which needs to actually tap into the euro market. And why is that? Because we don't have a real capital market union. Now, I know it's a joke in Brussels that they have tried everything already, and I don't know what the problem is, but I don't care. You need to solve it in Brussels. Yes? Next commission, solve it. Yeah? So that is one. It's a win-win. It would be great for you. It would be great for us. It would be great for the infrastructure. So that is something we could work on together. Then let me talk implementation. We actually have to go for not discussing all the times the rules, just doing something in an easy way. For example, this morning in the newspapers, we had a report from the German Minister of Economics and Energy and Climate is actually proposing to actually have a green steel quota and green cement quota to actually start up markets, which would be great for us, because this would mean we as an energy industry could supply energy which would still be affordable for our clients, because they could actually charge it on via the higher prices that they could achieve in these quotas. Problem, we are probably going to discuss for 3 years what green steel is, then we're going to discuss another 3 years what green cement is, then we will have rules which we can't implement because they are so complex, and then in 5 years we might start up markets after everybody else in the world has done that already. So implementation would be one. So I could actually tie it. I think what we should focus on is not how can we provide you energy cheaper than we have provided in the past. That will probably not work. But we could work on win-win situations which actually trigger growth and innovation. So that would be my plea from the power industry.
So implementation more than discussion, right? So that's the point.
Yeah, but we can't afford another discussion like we had on what is green hydrogen. Yes. That is silly.
I agree completely. George, your perspective, perhaps also more on the southeastern part of Europe, how you see that in 5 years from now?
Yes, of course. First of all, let me start by saying how proud we are for hosting this event in our country. And thank you to everybody who have joined us in Athens. We hope we will host it and we will meet your expectations, so thank you very much. Then just to go just a bit on underlining of what Leo have said on the Euro perspective and what Dimitri is, I think it's time for Europe, adding on what has been said, it's time for Europe to focus on technology a lot, in my opinion. Europe has been always the user of technologies around the world. And there's so much things to do. we will finance all the green transformation of the world in reality, starting from Europe. So it's a pity not to focus on new technologies which can be born in this continent. So this is very important. Focusing more on the Southeast Europe, where we are in our neighborhood, I think starting from this country in the last 5 years, I mean, given what we have lived in with the COVID and the energy crisis, I mean, we have done, I would say, remarkable looking back. In Greece, the solar and wind has grown, has doubled. Adding hydro, more than 60% is generated by clean technologies right now. So looking back, we have done a remarkable growth. CO2 emissions have dropped significantly by 60% as well, because as a result also of the fastest lignite phase out that we are doing in the country. 60% of lignite has been off already in our plan, and the rest will go at zero by 2026. So a lot have been done, a lot more to do. We are actually executing the fastest renewables platform right now in the region with around 4.7 gigawatt already in operation, and an additional, we will double that in the next 3 years, more or less, not only Greece, but also in Romania, where we are growing a lot. We're trying to add 1.5 gigawatt. So we have very ambitious plans. And if you look 2030, only 6 years to go. And I want to go back to the energy crisis and the Ukrainian situation and how we are handling it. And I think the magic word is unity. We need to work together, and when we work together, we bring the result. And only if we work together, industry and energy providers, Europeans, country by country, reinforce interconnections. We need the interconnection so we can have more flexibility also through that way, but also energy security, as in the case of Ukraine. And we need much more reinforced infrastructure in the distribution grid. There will be the opportunity to talk about it later on. And a lot of things will need to be done there in order to create also flexibility and become more efficient, so to help the competitiveness of our industry as well.
Yeah, great. I mean, Greece, as Commissioner was saying, is a very good example on success, on how to grow and implement the energy transition so far. So a decarbonized future system will actually need decentralized energy production, as we know, but also a bigger and renewed grid, right? Operating in 5 years from now, the European distribution grid will be much more complex task than it is today, with a higher level of digitalization in it. So, Leo, I know that, I mean, you are big on grid, right? And that you put grid at the center of the work that Eurelectric has done in this year, and we will see it also during this conference. So consider the investment needed on the grid. What would you do if you were given a seat in the next commission?
Oh.
That's an easy question.
Yeah. I would sort out the capital market issue.
Yeah, okay, first.
No, actually, 3 remarks. Number one is, whenever we look forward, we say, what will the world look like in 10 years? We've been always wrong as an industry for the last 50 years. Yeah? So as long as I remember, every prediction we ever made was wrong. So we should be very modest of saying, and whoever tells you now, at this time, I know the future, yeah, it's probably not long enough in the industry. Yeah? So what I mean with that is we should have a plan, but we should be flexible about it. That's number one. And now I'm going to tell you what my plan is. Yeah? So like, obviously, we're going to invest a lot of money. So in 3 years as a CEO, we have now doubled from 21 billion to 42 billion rolling investment plan for E.ON only. So doubling in 3 years, this is what we're talking. We're ramping up the people to do all of that. And so the system that we are building needs to be one that is looking much more at a holistic picture, because it needs to include heat, it needs to include mobility, it needs to actually, now we see that increasingly, include e-trucks, which like 5 years ago, we would have believed, trucks, maybe hydrogen, don't know whether this is working with power. But now we can really see it coming, yeah? And we see already the truck manufacturers coming. So this is number one. It needs to look at the total picture. And if we include heat and cooling and transport, we actually might come to a system which is more affordable. I said it already in my first intervention. So it's number one that we need to do. Number two is, I mean, you did the study, your company did the study on digitization. It needs to be fully digital. Now, from a resilience standpoint, digital is dangerous, yeah? We accept it, but there is no choice. Our systems of the future need to be fully digital. We need to be able to switch them on and off remotely, control them remotely, optimize them remotely. So that is number two. We absolutely need to be fully digital. You have done a maturity score. We're going to talk about it.
Yes.
They're going to be much larger. We're going to have a session after this session, or depending on your next guest. So, but in any way, we're going to show the Grid for Speed study, which just shows how much more we're going to build. So if we look at the future, it's just much bigger, hopefully much more holistic and much more digitized. If we can do that, then I'm hopeful that we can find a path. But we should not fool ourselves. We need to adjust the plan every other year.
Can I perhaps add here, I know better than to get involved in a subject everybody in the audience knows better than I do, but the issue of energy infrastructure, not only electricity infrastructure, it's something that Leo and I have discussed extensively at the European Roundtable for Industry, and I would encourage you all to go on the site and see the piece of work we put out with the help of BCG on the need to upgrade the energy infrastructure in Europe. It's probably the key pain point. It's fascinating because at the ERT we have sort of the oil and gas players, we have the electricity players, we have the technology companies, we have the users, we have the hydrogen proponents, we have all of that stuff. And so there was actually a pretty active discussion of is this a priority? Absolutely. Is it being underestimated politically, and are the targets very hard to get to because of the national borders, because of the permitting, because of the funding and everything? Is it very expensive? Yes. I think the estimate was 0.8 trillion money, which is real money. Do we have a sufficient business case for the private sector to invest today? We don't. So there's a lot of work to be done, but it's a win-win for everyone. Getting that energy infrastructure, and we can argue whether electricity comes first, that should come first, but we also need carbon capture and everything, that's fine. But do we need to significantly upgrade our investment in infrastructure, including storage? Absolutely, and that should be a top priority, which is why we came up with that report.
George, we touched digitalization, right? And I know that digitalization is one of the 3 pillars of PPC transformation program. So can you share how you see a more digitalized PPC group in the future? Which are the benefits you want to achieve, or you already achieved, actually?
Yeah, thank you. Just adding on what has been said, I think that the only known part of the equation for the future is the volatility we will have.
Yeah.
So having a constant volatility in the transition, moving from oil and gas to clean technologies, this is the reason why we need to adjust, also another reason why we need to adjust every year. And one of the answers is digitalization as well. So with digitalization, you provide, for instance, flexibility with demand response. With new systems and services. With digitalization, you make an infra also much more flexible and able to accommodate new elements as it will be discussed. I don't want to get so much on this because there will be a session for that. But in PPC, we have embarked on this journey in the last years. We have one of our pillars of our strategy is the digitalization investments we do across all business lines, in particular to our distribution network with smart meters that we are lagging behind a bit in Greece, or we're more advanced in Romania, and we will be pushing a lot. But the whole smartification of the grid, so IoTs, automatic controllers, the automation of it. But not only there, we don't stop on the energy part of the digitalization. We have continued to the deployment of fiber network to every Greek home. We are deploying an ultra-fast fiber network, for FTTH network for every house, reaching 3.5 million homes. We have entered into the international submarine fiber connectivity from Greece, Italy, Saudi Arabia, and the rest of Asia. And we have recently started an investment on the data centers with DAMAC. You know, there is a lot of discussion about AI and data centers, and if you think of a utility, there's so many in common with this industry, both in terms of our capability to provide the energy required, question mark there, because there will be a lot of needs increasing because of this sector, as well as the infrastructure needed in terms of cooling and other services. So we are entering significantly in this part, and we will continue in the coming years.
So thank you. I mean, digitalization means really a broader scope and new business opportunity for all. I think our time is over. We have a distinguished speaker now. So thank you so much. The discussion was very interesting. And let's continue. Thank you.